First of all, we would like to tell us about the exhibition today.
Well, the exhibition, the exhibition today is by a group of PhD students, doctoral candidates, and they come from a variety of fields in the arts. Basically, our PhD program is very integrative of many disciplines: performance, dance, theatre, web, internet, architecture, design, and so on and so forth. Largely, well, entirely creative people who are involved in the program to theorize their practice, to understand better what the potential is within this field of art and technology and science and consciousness. And by consciousness, I mean all those aspects of the self, of identity, of perception, of cognition, that are changing because of the new technological environment that we're living within. And their aim is to be creative, to find creative methodologies, creative ambitions, creative pathways within this domain of the technological culture that is presented. So tonight we have an exhibition of posters which are looking at a rather important aspect of this field, because what has happened really in the last 10 years is there's been a convergence of dry computational, silicon dry computational systems on the screen and so forth, digital systems, and wet biological processes. And these things are coming together. So we're looking at what we call moist media, the way in which the body is changing, the body in relation to nature is changing, nature itself is changing, architecture is changing, as we have completely different kind of model of what the future might be. It's not going to be cyborgs with metal arms walking up and down or some sort of robotic things like this. We're talking about working with DNA, about tissue, about bodies, about new ways of thinking of identity, basically. What it will be to be human, what are the behaviors which are changing and will change within this environment, seen through the spectrum, of course, of the artist. But science is important to us as metaphor. None of us are scientists. None of us are claiming to, solve quantum physical formulaic problems or something like this. But we do understand the metaphors, the implication, for example, of nanotechnology, of quantum physics and so on. And it's those metaphors which resonate with the metaphors in art. I don't want to give you a lecture, but I'll give you a very simple example. Physics has been transformed by the understanding in the 20s of a different kind of relationship between the observer and the world which is being observed, such that one of the rules of physics is that even to measure something within the domain of the atom, at that very low level of materiality, is to change it. The very measure, even to look at something, will cause a change in its behavior. That's a fundamental principle of quantum physics, which doesn't equate at the macro level, because if I look at that chair, it doesn't alter, nothing happens, it stays there. But if I'm looking at particles and I'm observing them and measuring them in a certain way, their behavior will change. So curiously, that's what is happening in art now. In art now, we no longer have a thing on the wall which sits there and you look at it. In looking at it, it will change. It will sense that you're looking at it. It will sense that you're approaching it. Just as in architecture, we have intelligent buildings that know you're getting cold and know that you're just about to go through the doors, and so they open at a very crude, simple level. So art is very much about interactivity, and indeed a great deal of science is. So what we draw from science is the metaphor, not the mathematical proof or something like this. And the same is happening in chemistry and in biology and so on. So that's our relationship to science, and we're concerned with the implications for behavior and identity. I mean, for example, well, I'm an old player, but many, many young players in Second Life have 5 or 6 avatars. They have many selves which are out there. You create yourself. This is a phenomenon. This is a new development in what it is to be a human being. As artists, we're interested in that. And so that's really an important part of our agenda. What is it to be, you know, a human being? I don't mean that. You know, what is identity? We all now create our identity. Whereas when I was a kid, you were told you're good at maths or bad at maths. You're your mother's son. You behave. You know, you do this. You can't do that. You're stupid. You're bright. None of it now. We invent ourselves. That's what you see it in fashion. You see it in behavior, particularly in a younger generation. But the whole of the culture is changing like that. So we're interested as an artists in identity. We're interested in behavior. We're interested in rethinking architecture. What is a city? What are cities? What is nature? It's, you know, nature for centuries was something over there. A tree, you know, was that thing in the middle distance. But now we know what a tree is a process. It's a process of gaining nutrients from the earth. We have different conceptions of nature. What is a city anymore? Well, I mean, you know, what were cities for? They used to be supplying goods. Those goods are out in the country now in supermarkets. I mean, everything is shifting. So as artists, we're interested in those shifts. We're interested still interested in the old values of bringing beauty into the world, of poetry, of finding new metaphors. But I think, you know, there's a philosopher called Richard Rorty, who said it very well. He said that the problem with human culture is that we start off with metaphors. You know, a metaphor isn't the real thing. A metaphor is about something. But some of those metaphors persist so long, they become truths. And one of the jobs of the artist is to be critical and say, no, that's a metaphor. That's not the truth. It's a metaphor. It's near, but I'm going to give you a new metaphor. So artists are people who produce new metaphors, just as scientists do. You know, that's the commonality between us, actually. You know, so it's great. It's fun. It's a great responsibility, and it's not limited. In the old days, you'd have someone called a painter, and then you'd have a poet, you'd have a musician, and a dancer, and an architect, and a product designer. Now we have a transdisciplinary field. Of course, you may focus in on something, but the thinking is transdisciplinary, and our research is about that. What is it like to be involved in the world as a transdisciplinary artist? I still use the word artist, I'll tell you why, because it's a passport to get into anything. If you were a biologist and you went to a physics lab, you said, I just like to look around, guys. They say, you're a biologist, forget it. But if I go and say, I'm an artist, come on in, you can't do any harm. And I can go anywhere, so I keep artist on the passport. You don't put it on the passport, but if you did, I would have artist, because it gives me freedom to go anywhere. So I still keep the word, but in the way it's a dangerous word, because it gives you the idea of like Van Gogh, or who I admire, Cézanne, who I particularly admire. But nevertheless, you know, it's another era, it's a different thing. But we still keep that name, and we still talk about art. But it's changed, it's interactive, it's transformative, and also it's like using wet media, which is what this exhibition is about, these posters are about.
Okay, as I can understand, you want to make a step forward in everything.
In the world, we're trying to anticipate what is coming, and we're excited about what is the case, and we want to celebrate it, and we want to build on it, and we want to make a contribution through it. It's not just to say how lovely it is, but how can we help in this construction of a new world, of a new meaning in life, you know? And it's interesting to me because this network that I have developed is in Switzerland and Italy and so on, like this, and here on the island. But I'm also developing in Shanghai another institute which is also looking at these issues, and maybe they will come together. But that's another, you can imagine, that's another challenge, another world, which is just really emerging in a very, very interesting way. So the world is really open, and a lot is happening, and artists have a contribution to make. And I think the problem has been, and the problem still with funding bodies, certainly in America and in Europe, is that the artist is seen as is too much seen as passive, as a sort of passive observer who then kind of celebrates it, which is great, but not as an active participant in the culture, and that's what we're particularly interested in with our research. Wow, you listen to all of that.
No, it's very interesting things. Something for the last. How do you think that your university can have a cooperation with the Technological University of Ionian Alliance?
Well, I think, first of all, by staking out a territory, what are the issues that are most interesting to the creative minds, and I include, well, I just include, I would start with the youngest students, moving right up through to the faculty, right through the whole system, because that's where you've got to look, right through the system, not just the teachers or not just the students. And what are the issues? What are the real living issues for people involved now in learning? What do they want to learn? How can they learn? What are the ambitions for how they might learn? I think that's one set of questions, because we'd be interested in those. And for you, for that institution to know more about what we're about, which is what this tries to do. We had an exhibition here before, 2 years ago, again with posters. We come here pretty regularly. Certainly we're going to be here every year. And of course, Katerina Carusos is the executive director of a node actually here. It's just beginning, we just have 2 students, it will build up. And I fully expect that the relationship with your institution and our groups will grow. There's every reason why it should. In fact, if it doesn't, in a certain sense, we're not doing our job. Because the point is to be responsive to the immediate environment, as well as having grand ideas about the world and the future. What is happening here? And we'll find out what is happening here with those minds which are particularly concerned with thinking and doing, which is to name students. That's what students are about. And the students are there in that technical institution. So I think we have to find ways, pathways, which will make a relationship develop. Not just because it's like a good thing, but it's vitality on both sides. You know, I think vitality comes from relatively young people, as well as people who are thinking very analytically in a more perhaps advanced way. So yeah, I think it will grow, and it certainly can grow, and I hope it does. So we'll see.
We'll see, yes, of course.
Give it a couple of years and we'll see.
Okay. Thank you.